conversation going. Hey, thanks.
Hello, guys. All right, let's talk about fintech. And I named this panel Fintech Fever because I think the alliteration in F is pretty good, for one. And many people are thinking that there's a lot of money going into fintech right now, a lot of companies. So we're going to discuss that as well as your companies. So maybe let's start with you, Ricky. Because as we were just saying backstage, you started Tandem quite a few years ago. You were ahead of the curve in many ways. How did you feel when so many companies tried to join this space?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's really interesting because challenger banking, although people talk about it being super busy, and in the UK we do have some competitors. I mean, N26 sits as really one of the only European players in this space. So in the UK, because we had a change in legislation in 2012, we decided to set up a challenger bank. And at the time, everyone thought we were crazy because they were like, how are you going to take on these massive Goliaths? But actually, it turned out a few people were having the idea at the same time. So, I mean, Europeans probably don't know the story, but Monzo was actually born out of Starling. So it was actually us and Atom that started first, and then Starling started, and then they had a huge fallout, and the CTO and most of the management team left and formed Monzo. So there were sort of three starters, and that's emerged into 4 players. But it's still, you look at the UK market, £53 billion revenue pool in retail banking. It's the largest industry, full stop. So when you talk about fintech being a big thing and attracting dollars, it's also banking is one of the largest markets in the world. $2 trillion of revenues, and so it kind of makes sense if you're actually going to go after that revenue pool that this would be a bigger investment area.
What about Revolut? Because you name a bunch of names, but not Revolut.
Well, Revolut's not a bank. I mean, the interesting thing is beyond those 4, there are another 400 prepaid startups in the UK, and that was the way you guys started, N26. Revolut has chosen to go regulatory light, which has been a great advantage in terms of their ability to go multi-country. But they're already hitting some headwinds in terms of actually getting licenses, because when we went and spoke to the regulator, we were like, can we do prepaid first? And they actually said, we'd rather you didn't do prepaid because they'll prejudice your banking license. So I think Revolut is still, most customers are coming to Revolut for a foreign currency card, not for a bank account. So it's a slightly different thing. It does compete with us in the edges, but I'd say that's 10% of their base.
And at N26, you started in Germany, so a bit away from the crowd over there. Do you think it was an advantage?
So I think we actually started in the hardest market. I think like Germany, if you look at consumers, I think they're still more reluctant than in other markets to try new products, to try new startups. So I think it made us, in a sense, stronger. So we've started in Germany, Austria. We've then expanded to around 17 markets, where we everywhere, like in France now, we're in Italy, some of the fastest growing markets for us. And we've just recently expanded to 4 more markets, the Nordics and a couple of Eastern European markets, and last week into the UK. And what we see is actually that we can really easily replicate what we're doing in our home markets, in other markets. And we've changed a little bit our vision over the last year from being a European player, first a German player, then a European player. And we now see we need to take this global, and that's what we're working on. Because as you said, Ricky, I think it's a $1 trillion market around the world, and I don't think it's crowded at all. I think if you look at how many challenger banks or how many fintech startups have really more than 1 million or 1.5 million customers, it's maybe a handful of startups in Europe. And I think it's much too less. I think there should be many more startups attacking the market, and I think the opportunity is huge. And if you go to the US, you don't have really any players in the banking market yet. If you look at the rest of South America, you have one or the other, but I think it's a huge opportunity for a market that is somewhere between 2 trillion and 4 trillion in value.
And at Tandem right now, you're just in the UK. Do you think you're going to expand beyond the UK?
Yeah, so we actually had a press release where we've announced our first partnership to expand into Hong Kong. So we think Asia is a really interesting opportunity. We actually had some limited operations in Germany, thanks to the good people behind Brexit. The way we've put that on ice a little bit to see what happens next March. But I think there's, this is definitely a global play, and it's also a really interesting thing because coming back to even there are some huge banks in the world, but there's actually no global bank. So HSBC is probably the nearest thing you get. But you look at HSBC, it's actually only active in retail banking in about 3 European markets. And each of those is separately regulated, and you can't even send money between one of those accounts and another one without having a hell of a lot of hassle. It's almost easier to get from HSBC to Citibank. I studied in France for a while, and getting money from my London HSBC account to France was a disaster. So, I think there is a real opportunity not just to access this, this $1 trillion market, but also to actually be the first of a wave of global industries. In the same way that Amazon is, one of the first global retailers, there's a really interesting opportunity there.
And before being global, would you consider Tandem as a British company or European company?
I'd like to consider it as a European company. I've actually lived in France and Spain, sadly not Berlin, but and I would say we, more and more, we were talking about this off stage as well, like the European market used to kind of be, from a VC and startup perspective, the UK and little bits and pieces. And in the last 5 years, we've seen a real transformation where there are loads, of tech hubs appearing, and actually it's becoming a really exciting, unified European market.
Yeah, and I think it sells a lot. The European regulation has been really great. For N26, for instance, you got a banking license in Germany and you were able to launch everywhere, basically. Do you think it was a great help to get started and get so many customers so quickly?
Definitely. So I think getting a European banking license, enabling you to go to all these markets is definitely a huge advantage. We are now live in 22 markets, and it's obviously great because it's one regulation in the background. On the other hand, you still need to adapt to kind of local verification laws and a couple of complexities in the background. Yeah, high level, it always like, okay, you launch in all these markets, but there's still a lot of complexity going from market to market, not on the regulation side per se, but on consumer protection, on verification, on these steps. So it's not all the same for all the markets, but you also build up some kind of expertise. Yeah, so I think because we have started in one market and now in 22, we actually know how to enter new markets, and that has definitely helped. And we have the capacity within N26 now, where we have more than 550 people here in Berlin and around the world, and that capacity obviously helps us to drive this global expansion.
I'm interested though, Valentin, as well, because also from how I understand it, obviously a deposit-taking license that you've got allows you to passport in all European countries, but that doesn't cover credit in the same way in each country, does it? So credit licensing is slightly variable across the region, isn't that right?
For N26, we have a full banking license, so we can do everything from credit to deposit taking. So we can basically do everything any other bank can do.
Yeah, and that applies in all European countries?
In all European countries.
So it's consumer protection.
So also we'll be actually, I think the week after next, we'll be also launching. So we've launched last week in the UK with like the first product, and we'll be launching I think in 2 weeks, or in the next month. Let's see, it's always product timelines. We'll also be launching a credit functionality in the UK, and then we do on our own balance sheet. So like we can do most of the things from a regulatory perspective.
It's great because I don't have to ask any question. You're doing my job. So you focus on credit. Let's talk about credit for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Why did you focus on credit where everyone is focusing on current accounts and
Yeah, so I mean, look, there's two different sides to this problem, to the picture. One is, what problems you can see solving for customers, and that's obviously the first one you think about as a startup. And if you want to get consumer adoption, you've got to be solving problems for customers. And so from that perspective, some of the most urgent problems that exist in the market are things like running out of money at the end of the month. It's one of those things that banks have never really addressed. Overdraft is a really sloppy product to address a few days shortfall. And indeed, in the UK anyway, there's a lot of penal charges around that product. But there's another perspective as well, which is ultimately, we're talking about this $1 trillion market, about 80% of the banking revenue pool is in credit. So, you can talk about banking and from a customer perception point of view, banking's current account. But from a actual revenue perspective, banking is credit. So, I think it'd be fair to say that while we're more credit focused, we think it's a competitive advantage. We spend a lot of time on underwriting and data, and really data sits at the core. My co-founder founded Capital One, and that was their big thing, was the use of data for credit better underwriting. But I think you'll see that the market, while from a sort of consumer entry point, has sensibly started with current account, a lot of players will be moving increasingly towards credit over the course of the next few years. I don't know how that fits with your strategy.
I think we have a slightly different perspective. Yeah. So I think we see that most of the banks reduce themselves to credit. I think in the end, it's all about the daily recurrence. And we see N26 as the opportunity of being an app that is open daily by our customers. So that's what we see already today, that the people that use N26 actually open our app daily. And if you think about how many apps on the smartphone you are actually opening daily, it's not too many. It's maybe 4 or 5. Yeah? And I think as the future bank, you need to be a problem solver. And credit is only one problem. There are other problems. There is like you have subscriptions running on your account where maybe you're paying too much. There is maybe, you book a very risky activity. Maybe you want to get an accident insurance for 4 days. So I think most of the banks are limiting themselves to financial problems where based on the trust of the consumer and the data set that you have, and also the closeness of being able that the user pays for a new product quickly with one tap. I think that things where you as a bank, if you build a great brand, can solve many more problems for customers than just only the credit problem. And I think if I think about the whole industry, I think in like the next 5 to 10 years, I think you will have certain players that really specialize into one niche product. Maybe credit, maybe savings product. And then you will have other players.
Like you?
Maybe us, yeah. I think we have a shot to be that are open daily where the decisions are taken. And I think there are both ways. I think the traditional banks more in the having a special product, having a huge balance sheet and maybe getting a better a price on some of the products, but they will be integrated, I think, into the platforms that are commonly used. And I think with N26, our vision is really to build an app that you love to open daily because it solves your problems. And I think that's how we think about the whole thing, not so much about the financial product.
But you don't generate revenue from someone opening the app. Do you think you're focusing on revenue now enough, or do you think it's going to come down the road in a couple of years?
So what we have seen actually, that we've built a traditional banking product from a sense where we are replacing a traditional bank account as a subscription business and daily recurrence. So all our revenues are coming from how often do you use our card, how often do you
interchange fees.
Yeah, interchange fees, how often do you interact with us. And our beauty is that we have a cost base that is a fraction of the cost base of a traditional bank. So we don't need to do all these complex financial products and have a big balance sheet to be much more profitable than they are. And I think that's the key. And I think the more engagement you have, the more problem-solving opportunity you have. And if you solve problems for customers that are valuable to them, then you naturally can also build revenue streams out of that. And that's what we've been doing over the last 2 years. And I think in the next 2 to 3 years, I think we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, I completely agree on the engagement front. So, for example, our card and app users are 90% weekly active 6 months after coming on book. Now, that excludes the people that don't actually activate, but that includes all activated users, which is super high.
So when you start, these guys are using it.
So these guys are, once they start, they keep using it, and also they continue to active. And our average opens right now is at 1.2 per day for that segment. So it's like we're at a super high active daily usage, and I think that is really important. I think I think there's always two perspectives to a business. There's a consumer perspective, which is that one's absolutely right. And I think for too long, the big banks have been super focused on the back end of the business and are not enough focused on the front end of the business. So, but there is a question, because there's a big thing going on in the UK. There's a lot of chat about marketplace banking, particularly Starling in the UK has really set out, I think they're on stage later today, have really set out their stall as marketplace banking. And the interesting thing about marketplace banking, what we found actually with real experience, because we've got about 72 sort of nudges that can bring people into a discussion about either some money they can save, they've got 2 subscriptions, they've got, they might want insurance, all this other stuff. But what we found is the more we try and push revenue in that area, the less customers love it. So, the challenge with marketplace is if you build your business model around it, you've got an inherent contradiction between customers loving you less when you make more money. And so I think there's a really interesting And that somewhat informs our credit perspective, which is we want to just do the best job for consumers, which often for us means making no money in those interactions. Because actually, if we're selling free product, or indeed if we're doing things where we're finding the best price, then we actually get more customer response at that front end. And actually at the back end, we're still making money the same way a bank makes money. So we're able to fund, if you like, all this great customer stuff at the front end. So it is a different perspective, but I think it's quite an interesting differentiation.
I saw you were saying no with your head.
Yeah, because I don't think that it's like, I think what we see with our customers is, I think if we have a great product, they're normally also willing to pay a little bit for it. It needs to be transparent, and it needs to be a good value to consumers. But I think it's untrue that customers are always not choosing a product if you price it. Yeah, so I think that's a learning for us. I think maybe one more thing. I think what we are really focused on is on these products that have a lower or a shorter repurchasing cycle. So if you think about a mortgage, for example, we might be doing that at some point, either on the platform or ourselves.
We do that already. Yeah.
But the repurchasing cycle is maybe, you need a mortgage every 5 years. But if you really want to build like a viral product, if you want to have people talking about it, you need to focus on the products that they choose maybe weekly, maybe daily. And that's what we focus on. And so I think one product that is going to be great, it's coming in the first quarter, is you will be much more able to share also our accounts. Yeah? So you will be share them with friends. You will be able to invite friends to use account together. And we're much more thinking about how we can improve daily financial interactions in terms of managing your finances, sharing them with friends, having a shared account. And I think that's where we've seen, if we do that, there's a lot of virality around it. It creates a lot of loyalty to us, and we solve real problems for our people. Yeah.
That's very true.
So shared accounts coming soon.
Yeah, and that's something, for example, in the UK, Monzo's done a great job of, to talk about our competitors, but they've really focused pretty much singly on solving shared problems, and they've done that for customer acquisition reasons, which has been super effective for them. Obviously, they've got just over 1 million customers. They're smaller than you guys, but in one market rather than many. Yeah. So, I mean, it is a matter of focus, and it's interesting. You're hearing the sort of different levels of focus. You're primarily focused on engagement. They've primarily focused on virality. We have focused earlier on credit and therefore on revenue as well. So we're making £45 per user per year on average across our 500,000
more than
users.
Facebook.
Yeah, well, that's the average bank makes more like £250 per user per year, but we're already doing 45.
Yeah. But I think what is also important, for us, one number that I brought for TechCrunch today, I think we were always talking about the last number we announced in October was 1.5 million customers.
New numbers, I love numbers.
Yeah, I know, that's why I brought some. And then we now have more than 2 million customers already.
Wow.
And we have more than 1.5 billion euros in transaction volume a month. Yeah, I think next year will be far beyond like 20 billion euros in transaction volume in the year. And also, we have more than 1 billion euros deposits. Yeah, and that's important. So because the deposit number also shows kind of a little bit, at least, how people. It's not everything, but it's a little bit of a number that is shows that people also put money there and they use this as a real bank account. And that combined with like very sticky customers has been tremendous for us. And for the UK especially, we've launched last Monday in the UK, and it has been actually a very cool market, because always before you enter a market, there's some question marks. Yeah, there's maybe a little bit more players out there and so on. But this has proven completely wrong. I mean, we've launched. It's one of the most successful launches we've had as N26. If I compare it to the French market, for example, the French market is one of our most important markets. But
that was 3 years ago.
3 years ago. But when we launched it there, if you look at the pickup now in the UK in the first week, I mean, it's even much stronger than in the French market. And the French market is one of the most important ones for us today.
How many accounts do you have in the UK?
So in the UK, I think, I don't know the exact number today, but we're growing with around, so I think yesterday we were growing with around 1,500 to 2,000 customers on that single day. We've seen, like 3 days ago, it was 1,000. Yeah, so I think it's a great growth that we're seeing, and we have a couple of 10,000 accounts now after the first week, and I think that's great.
And what about Tandem? How many users do you have?
So we're just under 500,000 in the UK. So, and I think the interesting thing is, and we launched in January, so that's obviously a pretty rapid growth rate. And actually, what we're seeing, which is super interesting, is that actually, last year. Monzo was growing very quickly. We weren't in the market. Starling was growing very slowly. Adam's not really relevant from a UK perspective, and N26 wasn't there. This year we're seeing everybody's growing really quickly, and it's an odd phenomenon. Obviously, we are seeing quite a lot of overlap, so we allow you to aggregate your different accounts. We don't yet aggregate an N26 account. We should chat about that afterwards. But you can see your Monzo account inside your Tandem account. And because of that, we can see that actually quite a lot of users are multi-accounting at the moment. But what we're also seeing is some early signs of people picking a horse. So what tends to happen, particularly with the early adopter audience, is they will open an account with everybody because they want to check it out. They want to get the best product. And then what you'll see is over time, them kind of picking a horse, depending on the functionality they like, depending on the service they're getting there, and settling in. But that happens a little further down the road.
But
I
also think this is more for the early adopters.
Yeah.
I think what we've seen, especially in the markets that we're in now for longer, you obviously have a tech community, maybe most of the people in the audience that check out more products, compare them. I think what you need to understand for the UK is that more than 98% of the people are still banking with a traditional bank, paying high fees, having a bad experience. And in the UK especially, you have, I think, 60 or 75% of the people bank with 4 banks only. Yeah. So with 4 big banks, 75% of the accounts are, and it normally leads to high prices, bad experience, and not a lot of customer focus. And I think in the end, we'll have the early majority that are the early adopters that compare more, and it's also fair, and you need to have the best product. But I think in the long run, it's about tapping into these, 60 million customers or more that are still banking with traditional banks. And it doesn't matter if you have 6 million customers, we have 6 million customers in the UK, someone else has 6 million customers, and maybe we do it in 10 more markets around the world. I think that's bringing us to what we want to build, a company between 50 and 100 million customers over the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you just announced that you would launch in Hong Kong as well, because many companies launch across Europe, in the US. Why did you choose Hong Kong, and why did you choose to do a partnership?
Yeah, there's a couple different pieces. I mean, obviously, I suppose most people in the audience are aware, but China in particular has been one of the fastest movers globally in terms of disruption in banking, and it's happened in a very different way because ultimately, the 2 big tech giants, which both started from chat interfaces, but for example, WeChat has moved into WePay and then into WeBank, and actually now. Actually brings in like a remarkable, it's north of 50% of short-term lending in China comes in through that one bank. And they've actually been forced by the government to actually resell those loans onto the rural banks because they got lots of savings there, but they haven't actually got any lending. So, I mean, what they've done is they've come in very much via a payments route, but from chat rather than coming in from a current account perspective. But one of the exciting things is there are a load of massive Asian markets, and my previous 2 businesses were both payments businesses, both working in the developing world. So Asimo and Small Financial Services, and there is okay, it's all very well to look at Europe and the US, which certainly if you're looking for US VCs, going to the US has always been a good trick because the US are amazingly short-sighted about actually going and investing outside the US. Some of them have opened European offices even here in Berlin, but that's really a small cadre. And the exciting thing here is the opportunity, as I said, for a global bank, and some of these Asian markets are really ripe for disruption.
Okay, one last quick question. Do you think we're going to see some sort of consolidation in the market? Let's say you launch all over Asia and N26 launches in the US. Are you going to work together at some point, for instance?
I mean, the truth is, you look at the global banking market and there are, hundreds of huge banking players right now, even in the UK market you mentioned. There's like 4 pretty similar sized players. So I'd say there's plenty of room for the existing cadre of neobanks to be incredibly successful on a global basis without any mergers and acquisitions. I mean, I think what you will see, probably not now, but in 3-5 years' time, is some big offers going down on the table from traditional banks trying to buy into these guys. I think you'll find some people, particularly us, I would say, that's not a route we want to take. However, there are other players out there who I think will be open to some large valuations and taking money off the table. I think it's less likely that you see, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, Valentin, but an N26.
Yeah, I think there is a couple of players that are set for being a global bank, and I think we're trying to take the shot to be a global bank, and I think it's about building up 50 to 100 million users in the next couple of years.
So are you going to get acquired by Deutsche Bank or Barclays? Yes or no?
No.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if you want to dig a little deeper into the fintech scene, Ricky is going to be on the Q&A stage at 11:30 a.m. So go head over there and hang out with him for a little bit. If not, we're going to get into language learning. One of the best success stories out of the European tech scene is Babbel, and now they're moving into the US, which brings about all kinds of new challenges. So with that, please welcome to the stage from Babbel, Marcus Witt and Julie Hansen, and your moderator, Frédéric Lardinois. Clapping won't kill you. There we go.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
So we're going to learn some languages today. You're going to teach me something. Today, Babbel is pretty much the top-grossing language app in every store. You've been around for 10, 11 years, depending on who I ask. Didn't start out that way. You were pretty close to the brink in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah.